I'd like to call the meeting on corrections, military veterans to order. This is our Wednesday, January 31st meeting. Happy New Year. It's 9 a.m. and we're in conference room 430. Since this is our first committee hearing, I'd just like to introduce the committee. My name is Wed Jan. I'm the vice chair of the committee. To my right is Chair Mark Hashem. We also have Representative Di Morikawa, Representative Kanani Souza, and with us, Representative Mahina Poipoi. So first off, we'd like to start with House Bill 2241, which is relating to Civil Air Patrol. And we have Colonel Haraguchi standing by on Zoom.
Hey, good morning, Representative Chan, Representative Hashem. Thank you for this opportunity to testify on behalf of House Bill 2241. I do support it with amendment. I am the commander for the Civil Air Patrol Hawaii Wing. Last year, our wing provided over $3 million worth of volunteer hours in support of state activities such as 10 search and rescue missions, 2 disaster relief missions, air defense intercept training for the Hawaii Air National Guard. We were able to do that in part through a provision of $5 million worth of equipment, including 9 aircraft, 14 vehicles, and an array of radios. However, what the federal government does not provide is funding for overhead expenses such as utilities, rent, things along those lines. Last year, there was a funding bill provided for Civil Air Patrol, and we do greatly appreciate that. However, based on our congressional charter, we are not allowed to comply with the provisions of HRS 42F because we are a federally chartered organization. So although the funding was great, it does prohibit us from essentially receiving a grant. So the amendment that is included in my testimony covers some of the language required to allow us to get funding toward that end. And again, more of the details are in the testimony itself. So beyond that, I stand on the testimony provided, and I am free for any questions at this time.
Great, thank you. Members, any questions for Colonel Haraguchi? Seeing none. Thank you, Colonel. There you go. Okay. All right, let's move on to House Bill 1812. First up, and this is relating to corrections. First up, we have Director Tommy Johnson in opposition.
Yes. Good morning, Chair Hashem, Vice Chair Chun, and members of the committee. I'm Tommy Johnson, the Director of Corrections and Rehabilitation. I'll just summarize my testimony. I think this was a bill similar to this for last year. But in short, we oppose this measure because our policies are in line with the National Institute of Corrections and the American Correctional Association. Our policy, COR.11.01, inmate segregation, goes into great detail and is posted on our website. It's not confidential, and it goes into great detail about administrative segregation and disciplinary segregation. The term solitary confinement is no longer used, as you'll find if you read our policy. Second, if enacted, this measure would hinder our ability to quickly react to emergency situations. Recently, there have been a number of unprovoked attacks by inmates on correctional officers resulting in serious injury. One officer suffered serious facial structural injuries. Another was hospitalized after being pushed down a flight of stairs as he rushed to intervene to assist an inmate being assaulted. And yet another officer sustained a concussion. A nurse was attacked for no apparent reason, requiring her to go to the hospital while attempting to provide treatment services to the very same inmate that attacked her. If enacted, this measure would hinder our ability to react quickly to dangerous situations. Separating and monitoring offenders exhibiting inappropriate behaviors are necessary for the greater good and the protection of those offenders and those around them. In attempting to cover most scenarios, this measure requirements tend to go toward generalities, which is counter to updated national standards as explained in our policy. Thank you very much. I'll be here to answer questions if you have any.
Thank you, Director. Next, we have Ben Lenthal from the Public Defenders in support.
Good morning. The Office of the Public Defender supports this bill, supports an attempt to further regulate, while we don't call it, while the department does not refer to it, but it is solitary confinement. It is isolating prisoners. And I'll just be brief. Damaged people in our community go to prison, and when they come out of prison, they return to our community. And so these regulations are a positive step to ensure that when they are eventually released and returned back to the community, they're not further damaged, because otherwise it is just a repeating cycle. And so the Public Defender's Office believes that this bill is a step in the right direction towards ensuring responsible regulation. The concerns that are raised by the department about the need to isolate certain individuals, that is a legitimate concern. We do believe that the bill takes that into account, which is why they are detailed regulations. So we do support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Louis Erdeshek from the Hawaii Disability Rights Center in support. Trisha Chong, NAMI Hawaii in support. Opportunity Youth Action Hawaii in support. Kat Brady, Community Alliance on Prisons in support.
Good morning, committee, and Happy New Year. I'm Kat Brady, coordinator of Community Alliance on Prisons, and I really appreciate your hearing this bill. This bill actually builds upon the P&Ps that were written by Ted Sakai in his second round as director. And I wanted to point out that there's lots of information about the harms that solitary confinement causes to human beings. We're socially connected, and when you disconnect people, a lot of negative things happen. So it was interesting, in 2015, Hawaii sent a delegation to Norway, and along with our delegation was a delegation from North Dakota. And that delegation had the director and the deputy director of corrections. After they had done a tour, they met, and the director from North Dakota just said, "I cannot believe the harm we are causing people." So when she returned from Norway, she asked to see all the records of everybody who was in solitary, and there were about 100 people. And she went through them, and most of them were returned to general population. And she realized that what they're doing was not really helpful. So I want to focus on, there are things we can do besides solitary. When somebody is in some form of segregation, it's really important that they have connection to their family. So increased communication, visitation, positive incentives. That's really big in corrections across the world, where people are realizing that sanctions don't work, but you can motivate people by increasing positive incentives for them. So we really want to see solitary we really want to see the end of solitary. We want to see more proactive, connective issues that help people who are in solitary, because they're going to come out and then they might go to general population. Luckily, we don't release them to the street anymore, but at one point we did. We took people from solitary and just let them out the door, which was terrifying to them and to the communities to which they were returning. So we're really asking that we look broader. We look at human beings and what is the best thing we could actually do with people who are constantly misbehaving. We know this is a problem. We have lots of bills about behavioral treatment centers. So we know this is a problem. Let's address the problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Michael Older. Comments. Nicholas Chagnon in support. Isis Osborne in support. Wendy Gibson Vivani in support. Barbara Polk with comments. And we have late testimony from Carolyn Eaton in support. Carrie Ann Shirota in support. Is she available on Zoom? Okay. Olivia Chang in support. Angela Melody Young in support. Is that it? Yeah. Is there anyone else here willing or wanting to testify on this measure? Seeing none. Questions, members? Any questions? Director Johnson, actually I have a question for you on this. So this bill, as written, covers not only the prisons under your purview, but also contracted prisons. I was just wondering if this were to be implemented, how would that look? Would it be very easy to then transfer this policy over to a state contracted prison facility?
No, it would not.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, members, we're going to move on to House Bill 2483. This is relating to criminal history record checks. And first up, we have Director Johnson.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Tommy Johnson, the Director of the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. We strongly support this measure. In short, it provides the intake service center who handles our volunteer services and clears people to come into the facility with the statutory authority to do so. At present, the facilities are helping them out in doing it because they don't have a statutory authority to do it, so it puts a burden on the facilities. So by amending the statute and allowing the intake service center to do it, we can clear people to come in to provide services and to provide volunteers much more quickly than we do now. Thank you. And this is a no-cost item.
Hey. Thank you, Director. We also have a late testimony from Angela Melody Young in support on Zoom. Wait. And that's all we have registered. Is there anyone here wishing to testify on this measure? Seeing none. Members, any questions? Seeing none. Okay, let's move on to our last measure. House Bill 2725, relating to Correctional Facilities Authority. First up, we have Director Luis Salaveria, BNF, with comments. Next is Cheryl Kakazu Park, Office of Information Practices, with comments. Kevin Moore, DLNR, with comments on Zoom. Oh, all right.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Kevin Moore is on Zoom. However, Ryan Kanako-Ole, First Deputy, DLNR. The department stands on its testimony offering comments, specifically regarding the proposed Section 353-E on pages 9 and 10 of the bill. We want to note that the parcels identified in the bill are all classified as ceded lands and therefore considered public lands under HRS Section 171-2. So what is provided in Section 2 of the bill at page 9, lines 13 through page 10, line 2, would not apply. I think it exempts. There's a transfer section about public lands in there. Regarding page 10, lines 3 through 7, we would also note that most of the parcels identified in the bill are subject to set aside already by executive order. So resetting aside of the land will require approval by the land board and governor pursuant to HRS Section 171-11. Finally, most of the lands identified in the bill are disposed of or pending conveyance by EO or pending conveyance between HHFDC and DHHL or to the county. So these parties will all need to be consulted before conveyance to the proposed Correctional Facilities Authority. We're here for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Director Johnson in opposition.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Again, I'm Tommy Johnson, the Director of the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. We oppose this measure in short because it's a bill looking for a problem that doesn't exist. It would add additional layer of bureaucracy at a different agency. right now, the process is we work with the DLNR and DAGs to locate an appropriate site for a facility. It goes through an entire process that does work. And so I don't see the need to why we need to propose this measure. As you can tell, it's very problematic statute-wise and the way the ceded lands and other things. So for those reasons, we oppose this measure and say that the current process, although lengthy, it is very thorough and it works. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Bonnie Kahakui from the State Procurement Office with comments. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on this measure? Seeing none. Members' questions? Seeing none? Oh, you have a question? Okay.
Dr.
Go ahead,
Johnson, do you already have a site in mind for the corner jail?
Yes.
And- Okay, can you give that information to me later on? It doesn't
Yes.
have to be right now.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's all.
Any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, we're going to recess for decision-making. Okay, we're going to reconvene for our 9 o'clock agenda and conduct decision-making. So first up, we have House Bill 2241 relating to Civil Air Patrol. And the recommendation from the Vice Chair with the concurrence of the Chair is to pass with amendments. Basically, we're going to change the effective date to July 1, 2000, and the purpose for that is not to, delay the effect to 3000, but it's just to ensure that this bill will go to conference, and should it need changes along the way, that it can be made. Also, technical, non-substantive amendments for clarity and style, and we do note the testimony from the Civil Air Patrol with amendments to Chapter 42F. So what we'd like to do is put the testimony and include amendments into the committee report and ask that the Finance Committee, that this bill will move towards, take a look at that because it's changing the chapter which deals with state grants. We want to make sure that, that doesn't have any unintended consequences. So with that, any comments, questions, or concerns? Seeing none, Chair Hashem for the vote.
Okay, members are voting on HB 2241. Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendment. The Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Ganadin?
Aye.
Ichiyama is excused. Mizuno?
Aye.
Morikawa?
Aye.
Poi Poi?
Aye.
Takayama is excused. Souza?
Aye.
Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, members. Moving on to House Bill 1812 relating to corrections. The recommendation is to pass with amendments. We're going to HD1. We are going to make some technical amendments on page 5, line 7, change January 1, 2025 to July 1, 2025 to make it consistent with other parts of the bill. Also, page 14, line 15, to include the words due to a mental health emergency to be inserted between medical isolation and pursuant to this paragraph, just to make it consistent with the rest of the language. And also changing the effective date to July 1, 3000, and technical amendments. Members, do you have any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, Chair for the vote.
Okay, members are voting on HB 1812. Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendment. The Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Ganadin?
Aye.
Ichiyama is excused. Mizuno?
Aye.
Morikawa?
Aye.
Poi Poi?
Aye.
Takayama excused. Souza?
Aye.
Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next measure, House Bill 2483 relating to criminal history record checks. Recommendation is to pass with amendments. We're going to do a HD1 and just change the effective date to July 1, 3000, and technical amendments. Members, any comments or questions? Seeing none, Chair for the vote.
Okay, members are voting on HB 2483. Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments, noting the absence of Ichiyama and Takayama. Oh, all right. Noting the excused absence of Representative Ichiyama. Is there any comments, no's, or nothing? Okay. Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
All right, thank you, members. And moving on to the last measure, House Bill 2725 relating to Corrections Facilities Authority. Members, there are a lot of comments and concerns with this measure, so what we'd like to do is defer this measure to February 7th, next week, Wednesday, depending on whether we have an agenda, just to work on some language to see if we can come up with something. So again, we're going to defer to next week, Wednesday, with a time to be determined, depending on our hearings. And with that, we're adjourned. Thank you, members.